We are going to listen now to Nancy Secrest, who came from all the way from India to be with us. Nancy has been member of the GS for 40 years now, and she's a member of the American section. She has been National Secretary and National Treasurer, and she has been also member of the board for many years. She is now the International Secretary of the Theosophical Order of Service, and she's also the Treasurer, the International Treasurer, and she lives in Adyar. Her talk consists on two parts. So for the first part, she will be talking about our topic, so universal consciousness, and then there will be just a two minutes break, 2 minutes, not to go outside, to give Raquel, who's our lovely technician, to change programs so that in the second part, Nancy can talk about the International Theosophical Order of Service. Is that right? Okay, let me say it in Spanish now. Queridos amigos, vamos a escuchar ahora la intervención de Nancy Secrest. Nancy Secrest es miembro de la Sociedad Teosófica, lo ha sido desde más de 40 años. Es miembro de la sección americana y allí ella ha trabajado activamente durante muchos años, siendo secretaria nacional, después tesorera nacional y después en las secciones, en la sección americana tienen un ejecutivo muy grande en el que la gente que trabaja en él está trabajando a tiempo, no es tiempo parcial, sino que es en exclusiva. Ella ha formado parte de este equipo. Ahora mismo es secretaria internacional de la Orden Teosófica de Servicio y además es secretaria internacional, tesorera internacional en Adyar. Su charla consta de dos partes. La primera parte se referirá, ella estará hablando del tema del Congreso, la conciencia universal, y la segunda parte, en la segunda parte nos va a presentar o va a hablar un poco de la Orden Teosófica de Servicios Internacional. Entre las dos partes habrá una pausa mínima de 2 minutos para que nuestra queridísima y encantadora técnica Raquel, que está detrás del ordenador, tenga tiempo de cambiar de programa, porque en una hay un PowerPoint para mostrar y en el otro no hay PowerPoint. Pero al revés, la del PowerPoint es la segunda. Having said that, this is all yours. Tienes la palabra, Nancy.
Gracias, Ángeles. Buenas tardes. Have you ever watched a flower grow? We can see that it has grown. We can see the difference in it as it turns its face to the sun throughout the day and closes up at night. But we can't actually see it doing so. We can see the change in its height or the length of a vine in a day or a week or a season. But we never actually see the stem growing or the vine moving. I have often marveled about this process and our inability to watch it. Sometimes photographers have used film that is speeded up to show us the action of the flower or the vine. Many of us have probably seen this on TV or in a documentary. Then we can see the flower bursting open, or the vine growing with aggressiveness and strength as it pushes its way out of the soil or even through concrete. It's amazing. A seed is watered, planted, watered, and placed in the sunlight. Somehow it knows to split open under the ground. From that, a little stem is formed that reaches down to form roots and up, forming leaves and continuing to grow to a full-sized plant or even a 100-foot-tall tree. All of this is happening all around us, all of the time. But we can't see it as it happens, not with our physical eyes, because our brains cannot comprehend this extremely slow movement. Does this mean it isn't happening? Of course not. We see the results, so we know the plant is growing. We just can't see the process as it is taking place. Conversely, I remember going to a seminar where we were told to get in touch with trees. Several of the participants reported that they got the impression that the trees were aware of us only as extremely fast-moving objects that were perhaps a little bothersome, like gnats might be to us. Otherwise, our worlds did not interact from their point of view. How does a plant know to grow? How does it know the process by which it will come to maturity? Is there a school for seeds? Is there some form of education they go through? A kindergarten through level 12 for sprouting, making leaves, flowers, fruits, decaying, and using stored up nutrients for next year's flowers? No. All of this knowledge is inherent in each and every seed. Somehow, there is a form of consciousness that connects them all and of which they are entirely unaware. I'm not a botanist, and I'm sure there is no botanist who knows the impetus that makes a flower grow and bloom. They know the components of the plant, its life cycle, what we can do to help it grow, how to clone it or hybridize it, but no one knows exactly why or how it knows to grow, what causes the process, or what ties all the many kinds of plants together in their knowledge of how to mature and continue their life cycle year after year. This simple example gives a good argument for the existence of a universal consciousness that oversees all, not just plants, but minerals, animals, and human beings as well. Now, as you undoubtedly realize, the processes I've spoken about take place on the physical level of our existence. Therefore, it's just the start of a discussion of consciousness. Human beings, as our theosophical studies tell us, have a sevenfold constitution: physical, etheric, astral, lower and higher mental, Buddhic, and Atmic. Therefore, human beings who exist on emotional, mental, and spiritual levels as well as the physical share a universal consciousness, often called unity or oneness, that is at once our source of being and our ultimate goal as we progress through life and our various incarnations. Is the flower conscious of the physical process it goes through? No. No more than we are conscious of our hearts beating, our lungs inhaling and exhaling the air we breathe, the blood coursing through our veins, or the fetus developing in its mother's womb. These processes go on without our conscious direction or intervention. Of course, medical science has learned much of these processes and has found ways to alter them, often to our benefit. But that is not the topic of our conversation. For our purposes, suffice it to say that we are unconscious of these processes as they are happening. As we mature and grow, we can become conscious of our emotional and mental processes. We can learn to control our emotions, to raise them to a level that is more acceptable to whatever society we live in than the base instincts we share with other animals. We can learn to control our desires and our ways of reacting to stressful circumstances, and are encouraged to do so by civilized society. We can replace base desires with higher aspects of emotions, replacing lust with love, for example. And we can learn to understand certain situations without becoming angered by them or by finding more acceptable outlets for our anger than acting on it. Of course, it is at the mental level that human beings are really separated from lower animals. And it is here that we hit our stride. From childhood, we are taught many facts about how this works and how that came to be. We learn reading, writing, mathematics, and science, all the basics of the physical universe, how it began and how it operates. This is the realm of the lower mental that helps us to reason and think logically. All the while, many of us are striving to know more. Our intellect, our higher mind, looks for concepts beyond mere logic and reason. We see our lives and ourselves from a physical perspective, but somehow we know there is more. This very fact is what drew many of us to Theosophy in the first place. We begin to question what we have been taught, to see its limitations. We begin to explore more abstract concepts, including religions and philosophies. We question everything. Why are we here? Where are we going? What is the purpose and meaning of life? What lies beyond? Does anything lie beyond this life? What form might it take? What is love, justice, freedom? Are we each unique or are we interconnected? How? Why? Does something or someone direct us? Is there a God? For Theosophists, many of these questions are answered through patient and detailed study. In Isis Unveiled, The Secret Doctrine, and Key to Theosophy, H.P. Blavatsky delves into cosmogenesis, explaining in great detail the origin of all from an occult or esoteric perspective, based on ancient wisdom she gathered during her lifetime. Because Blavatsky herself yearned to know more, to have her questions answered, she traveled extensively in search of that which pointed to the true meanings behind what we have learned through physical science. In the book, Madame Blavatsky, Occultist, by Josephine Ransom, she says of Blavatsky, "She desired vehemently to understand, and went both openly and secretly after any clue that would lead her to the knowledge she longed for. Gradually, as her insight became clearer, her classification of the occult became more definite. She discovered that one must go through almost unbearable, patient discipline, supported by unwavering aspiration to gain the exalted goal of self-realization, to that freedom of the self, which is the crown of all human existence." Through her discourses on anthropogenesis and the three fundamental propositions, we learn of the oneness of all life, periodicity and cyclicity, and the pilgrim's path that all of us tread, carrying us from life to life as we gain insight and understanding. The study of Theosophy can be a lifelong endeavor, many lifetimes actually, and it touches all aspects of life, death, and that which lies beyond. Like Blavatsky herself, at some point, the true student of Theosophy, of the ancient wisdom, realizes that its study leads to more than just intellectual learning. Our study must touch every facet of our lives. It must touch the very essence of our being. We must sink our roots deeply into the study outlined by Blavatsky, Alcott, Judge, Besant, and others as we strive toward universal consciousness to gain the exalted goal of self-realization and freedom of the self. In the little book, Doctrines of the Heart, Extracts of Letters from Indian Friends to Annie Besant, it says, "For the disciple, little is gained from teaching on the intellectual plane. The knowledge that infiltrates from the soul down in the intellect is the only knowledge worth having. And surely, as the days roll by, the disciple's store of knowledge increases. And with the increase of such knowledge comes about the elimination of all that hinders him on the path." What of that path? In her famous quote, Blavatsky tells us, "There is a road, steep and thorny, beset with perils of every kind, but yet a road. And it leads to the very heart of the universe. I can tell you how to find those who will show you the secret gateway that opens inwards only and closes fast beyond the neophyte forevermore. There is no danger that dauntless courage cannot conquer. There is no trial that spotless purity cannot pass through. There is no difficulty that strong intellect cannot surmount. For those who win onwards, there is reward past all telling, the power to bless and save humanity. For those who fail, there are other lives in which success may come." And the voice of the silence tells us, "Search for the paths, but, O Lanu, be of clean heart before thou startest on thy journey, before thou takest thy first step to discern the real from the false, the ever-fleeting from the everlasting. Learn above all to separate head learning from soul wisdom, the eye from the heart doctrine." The voice goes on to say, "But even ignorance is better than head learning with no soul wisdom to illuminate and guide it." This path is not for everyone. It is a strenuous journey to undertake. It requires dauntless courage, spotless purity, a strong intellect, a clean heart, the ability to discern the real from the false, and the ability to separate head learning from soul wisdom. This is a tall order that requires much preparation and a complete and total commitment to our goal: self-realization, freedom of the self, universal consciousness. We can begin consciously on the emotional and mental levels of our being to gain the soul wisdom of which the voice of the silence speaks. As to head learning, study is the first of the three pillars of Theosophy, which are study, meditation, and service. We do need head learning. We do need our intellect, a strong intellect, but it is just a beginning, a basis for what lies beyond. Our hearts must be clean and our aspirations pure before we begin. To get to that point takes courage and hard work. We must develop these qualities by working on them every day through our interactions with others. I once heard Radha say that the purpose of theosophical lodges is for us to rub the rough edges off of each other. In our lodges, we organize, we plan, we sometimes disagree. We should expect to disagree and even argue at times. Our job is to learn from all that, to take a step back, ideally every day, and look at what has transpired and our part in it. We must examine our thoughts, our words, our actions, paying attention to our part in the daily interactions of life. Then try again the next day to act and react in ways that reflect the highest within us. We must learn to be patient with others and with ourselves, allowing them and us to make mistakes. We must see these mistakes as just that, mistakes or missteps, and not assign any greater significance to them. We must not point fingers. We must learn to forgive others and ourselves as well for any mistakes we might make and to move on to a new day. It does no good to dwell on such things. All this is true with the rest of our lives as well, not just within Theosophical lodges or the Theosophical Society, but at home and at work and in each and every situation we find ourselves, even interactions with strangers. We learn the lessons of a clean heart from everyone and everything. If we are diligent, we will have gained some semblance of understanding. We will progress with courage. We will have gained love for each other. The voice of the silence implies that from here we can enter the path with open eyes. We are ready to learn to discern the real from the unreal, the everlasting from the ever-fleeting. The second pillar of Theosophy, meditation, can also help us to develop the qualities we need to enter the path. Through meditation, we gain the sense of calmness and serenity we need to deal with the adverse situations that life brings to us. We can learn how to deal with and maybe even understand difficult people. It has been my experience that if I enter meditation holding a person with whom I am having difficulties in my mind, while wishing for them their highest good, remarkable things can happen. The first time I tried this, a beneficial thing happened for the person with whom I was having difficulties that also took them out of my life. I was delighted for myself and happy for them as well. That had worked so well, I tried it again with another difficult situation, when another difficult situation presented itself, and the thought of how to resolve the situation came to mind. The third time I tried this message, I saw that it was my own behavior that had caused the problem, and I changed it. There are many methods of meditation. Through some, we concentrate on gaining insight into ourselves. Through others, such as loving kindness or metta-meditation, we attempt to open our hearts and develop compassion for ourselves and others. Silent meditation on the breath, some object or a teacher or other who inspires us, leads us towards no thought or emptiness or universal consciousness. In the Diamond Heart Book 2 by A.H. Almas, it says, quote, "To see consciousness in its purity is to experience what is called universal consciousness, to experience the mind as pure consciousness. When you experience the mind as consciousness, it is also knowingness, the very element of knowing. It is difficult to describe what universal consciousness or what the mind as consciousness means because there are no thoughts in it. The moment there are thoughts, the content separates you from the consciousness." Because of this, we must experience universal consciousness to know what it is. In universal consciousness, the Diamond Heart Book 2 goes on to say, there is no experience, no experiencer, no self, the elimination of separateness, the elimination of discrimination. There is complete non-differentiation. There is no separation, no two, and no thought that there is one. Is this the soul wisdom of which the voice of the silence speaks? It is quite likely its source. Where do we find it? How do we develop it? We have already said that we must go beyond the intellect, that we must have the courage to consciously change ourselves on the emotional and mental levels of our being, and that meditation can help us to reach the next level, the Buddhic level of our human constitution. Once one aspires to soul wisdom, he or she realizes that, as it says in the doctrine of the heart, the interest that we have in all the affairs of this elusive sphere belongs only to the emotions and to the intellect and cannot touch the soul. So long as we identify ourselves with the body and the mind, the vicissitudes which overcome the Theosophical Society, the dangers which threaten its life or solidarity, must have a depressing, nay, sometimes almost a frenzied influence upon our spirits. But as soon as we come to live in the Spirit, to realize the illusory nature of all external existence, the changeful character of every human organization, and the immutability of the life within, we must, whether the brain consciousness reflect the knowledge or not, feel an inward calm, an unconcernedness, as it were, with this world of shadows, and remain unaffected by the revolutions and eruptions of the world. Once the higher ego is reached, the knowledge that the laws and powers which govern the universe are infinitely wise become instinctive, and peace in the midst of outward throes is inevitable. So it is the feeling of inward calm and unconcernedness that lets us know that we are moving towards soul wisdom, that we have touched upon universal consciousness. We feel a peace that outward events seems not to touch, as with the unconsciousness of activity inherent on the physical level of our being, the spiritual level moves and grows unconsciously as well. It is our job to work ceaselessly towards soul wisdom by consciously addressing our inward nature, thereby altering and improving what we think, say, and do in our lives. But the spiritual growth itself happens whether we are aware of it or not. Usually not. Wholehearted devotion to this process is required of those on the path, as well as trust that our efforts will bear fruit, that we will gain that to which Blavatsky herself aspired, the exalted goal of self-realization, that freedom of the self, which is the crown of all human existence. How can the self be freed? One of my teachers once said that love is the realization of unity. The terms unity, universal consciousness, and oneness seem, to me, to be interchangeable. So we might say, as the Beatles said, that love is all there is. Universal consciousness, as universal love, is an expression of the harmony of all that is. There is no conflict because it contains no parts, no divisions, no separateness. It is pure consciousness devoid of any thought or anything to rub up against. There is nothing to judge, nothing to weigh or measure, nothing to be prejudiced against nor biased toward, nothing to fear. It is pure love, a love that accepts and encompasses everything and everyone impartially as a totality. If we are fortunate enough to touch this consciousness, even for a brief moment, we know that nothing else exists. There is no I, no ego, no personality, only pure consciousness, only pure love. We have spoken about the benefits of using the first two pillars of Theosophy, study and meditation, to help us develop the soul wisdom that carries us along the path to universal consciousness. We have said that meditation can take us to the Buddhic level of our being, where we go beyond thought. Through our Buddhic nature, we also experience the generation of universal compassion, which helps us to identify with those who suffer and instills in us a desire to help. According to Buddhist teaching, compassion is the very essence of a spiritual life, and the main practice of those who have devoted their lives to attaining enlightenment. We have talked about watching our thoughts, words, and action in relation to others and the circumstances in which we find ourselves. We must be ever vigilant if we are to tread the path to universal consciousness. We must not limit self-improvement to those people or circumstances that are pleasing to us. In the words of N. Sri Ram, when we think of helping the world, of being brothers to all, we should remember that the world means also the unwanted who knock at the door at an inopportune moment, the people whom we may dislike for some reason, physical or mental, those whose appearance or ways may be disagreeable to our tastes, and those whom we might be ashamed of, if we were of that company. Service, the third pillar of Theosophy, can be seen as the point of balance between study and meditation, through which we give energy to Blavatsky's concepts of self-responsibility, ethics, and altruism. Service is that part of the triad that allows us to demonstrate the divine in the world. Through selfless service, we help to heal suffering humanity. We draw attention to the woes of the world and lead by example in the effort to ease suffering and right wrongs. In the process, we help ourselves. We grow spiritually as we become more and more open to seeing the unity of life wherever we look. Service can manifest itself as simple acts of kindness performed by an individual or a group, or as larger and more organized efforts. It can be aimed at family members, a neighborhood, a community, a gender, or other class of people, or at animals and even the planet. I recently attended a talk given by a TS member. She spoke of living a spiritual life. She talked about self-responsibility, ethics, and altruism, themes that ran through Blavatsky's works. In fact, Blavatsky said that these qualities are necessary for spiritual unfoldment, which she said is our goal, and that Theosophy is altruism. In fact, Blavatsky said that he who does not practice altruism, he who is not prepared to share his last morsel with the weaker or poorer than himself, he who neglects to help his brother man of whatever race, nation, or creed, whenever and wherever he meets suffering, and who turns a deaf ear to the cry of human misery, he who hears an innocent person slandered, whether a brother theosophist or not, and does not undertake his defense as he would undertake his own, is no theosophist. Later, these words from Annie Besant tied together Blavatsky's altruism, already a high ideal, with the sense of oneness alluded to in the Society's first object by saying, "The spiritual man must lead a life higher than the life of altruism. He must lead the life of self-identification with all that lives and moves. There is no other in this world. We are all one. Each is a separate form, but one spirit moves and lives in all." Acts of altruism and compassion ran through Blavatsky's and Besant's lives. The story of Blavatsky feeling compassion for a young woman with children who could not afford a ticket to board the ship Blavatsky was sailing on is well known. HPB exchanged her first-class ticket for steerage class tickets for herself, the woman, and her children, so that they might travel too. Besant was a social activist before she was even a member of the Theosophical Society. She worked for many social causes, toward better working conditions and wages for laborers and against child labor. She was even jailed for doing so. The first object of the Theosophical Society speaks of universal brotherhood. And in February 1908, Annie Besant founded the Theosophical Order of Service in response to members who wanted to put this concept into action in their daily lives. The TOS fosters a practical living application of theosophical principles and is a way to demonstrate and practice the oneness of all life. The giving of our time, talents, energy, money, advocacy, and moral support to those in need is based on compassion and on the acceptance of our responsibility towards those with whom we are one. Our TOS motto, "A union of those who love in the service of all that suffers," reminds us of our commitment to the oneness of all life. Even before the TOS was formed, the Theosophical Society was no stranger to altruistic action, to working for the benefit of others, to leading the way toward improvements in people's lives. In a talk given in 2014, Diana Dunningham Chapleton reminded us, quote, "What is interesting, though, is that in those days, the collective action of the members and their leaders actually caused the public to associate the society primarily with social reform. Early Theosophist magazines contained scathing commentaries on all kinds of social, educational, political, and religious abuses of the time. When Colonel Alcott appeared on theosophical platforms all over the world, he didn't lecture principally on metaphysics. He dealt mostly with such subjects as religious freedom, education for girls, cremation, and agricultural reform. These may seem innocuous to us now, but at the time they were very controversial. For Mrs. Besant and her fellow pioneers, such as Colonel Alcott, William Quan Judge, Isabel Cooper Oakley, and Countess Walkmeister, TS life and social responsibility were part of an indivisible whole. Some say that when Mrs. Besant created the TOS in 1908, it was to give an independent organizational focus for community involvement. But if this was the case, in practice, little distinction was made between the work of the TS and the TOS. Not much has changed today in that regard. Many of our members, whether individually, through the TS, or as members of the TOS, give selfless, compassionate service to those in need. Within the TOS, such service is given not just from a humanitarian perspective, as it is in many other service organizations, but from the conscious perspective of the theosophical worldview, knowing that those we aid are part of the universal brotherhood of humanity, the unity, the oneness, universal consciousness. As Annie Besant said, the spiritual person must lead the life of self-identification with all that lives and moves. There is no other in this world. We are all one. Clearly, Blavatsky, Besant, and others understood universal consciousness, universal love. Their lives prove it, as they were shining examples of selflessness, generosity, and knowledge gained through such experience. They trod the steep and thorny road, telling us over and over again what to do and how to do it, verbally, in their writings, and by the way they lived their lives. It is up to us to listen, to pick up on the nuances, to emulate their examples. It is up to us to see and understand that theosophy is not just head learning, not solely study for the sake of learning facts and concepts. Can we really learn concepts, know and understand them without putting them to use? We must live what we have learned. We must meditate on difficult concepts and ideas until we understand them, not just with our heads, but with our hearts and souls too. We must put into action that which we have learned. We must develop soul wisdom if we are truly to tread the path that leads to universal consciousness. For us as theosophists, the path to universal consciousness is a blend of conscious study, meditation, and service that requires courage, purity of life, constant effort and devotion to the work, to gain unconscious spiritual growth. We must grow as the flower grows, as it says in the little book, Doctrine of the Heart. Keeping serene and passionless, there is no doubt, as the days pass by, one is coming more and more within that influence which is the essence of life. And someday the disciple will be surprised to find he has grown wonderfully without knowing and perceiving the process of growth. For truly the soul, in its true blooming, grows like the flower, unconsciously, but gaining in sweetness and beauty by imbibing the sunshine of the Spirit. And that is the end of the first part of my talk. Okay. And so we need the next PowerPoint presentation, please. Okay. I have been invited to share with you a few words about the current activities of the Theosophical Order of Service. Today, the TOS is active in 31 sections of the Theosophical Society, doing humanitarian work based on spiritual concepts. I would like to share some of that work with you this evening to put a face on the service performed by TOS sections internationally. To begin with, you may not know that the TOS has a UN committee. The TOS's UN committee produced a brochure a few years ago outlining the support shown to the UN by every president since Annie Besant. This is the first in a series of brochures the TOS UN committee hopes to publish. One of the areas shared in common by the TOS and the UN is the promotion of peace. In the Philippines, conflict resolution and self-transformation workshops are being given by the TOS for the military. And recently, the TOS in France delivered hand-knitted teddy bears to the TOS in the Ukraine for distribution to children displaced by war. We also have many groups who run peace meditations. Natural disasters, like war, can displace many people. Unlike other TOS projects that may be limited in scope to a group's local area, natural disaster relief is a concern that we tend to respond to on an international level. In recent years, the TOS worldwide has responded by raising funds to help with cleanup efforts, rebuilding, and supplying food and water to those displaced by natural disasters, such as the earthquakes in Nepal last year and the unprecedented flooding in Chennai, India, a couple of years ago. Teddy bears, knitted by English, Italian, and French TOS members, made their way to many children affected by some of these disasters. A year ago, the International TOS and the TOS in India supplied a school in Uttarakhand, India, with the funds to build toilet facilities and to purchase desks and other furniture for their students and faculty. Members of the TOS in India are also doing hands-on rehab work. The school had been damaged in flooding a few years ago, and the students and faculty had been without proper facilities since then. This year, the TOS groups worldwide worked on a large variety of social service projects. Many TOS groups focused their attention on providing or supporting schools, particularly those that teach the children theosophical concepts and virtues. Helping children is close to the heart of many theosophists. Of course, the largest and most successful in these efforts is the Golden Link College. The Golden Link School, established by the Theosophical Order of Service in the Philippines, has been providing transformational education for less privileged children since 2002. 85% of its student body is on scholarship. The school is regarded as a model of theosophy in action throughout the theosophical world. Besides teaching core academics, the school teaches meditation and focuses on developing character, integrity, and self-confidence in its students. At the college level, courses in theosophy are part of the core curriculum. The qualities of character taught and modeled at the school will be communicated to others throughout the students' lives, with the potential of causing positive changes in the world that promote peace and harmony. The TOS in Pakistan provides homeschools for girls who would otherwise not be able to get an education. Members there are strong in their resolve to continue with their various programs unimpeded. The TOS in Finland supports the work of the Alcott Memorial Higher Secondary School and the Social Welfare Center at Adyar, Chennai, India, by supplying various needed items. This year, the TOS began a fundraising campaign for the benefit of the Alcott Memorial Higher Secondary School. The school is beginning to make some changes that will require more highly qualified teachers. In order to fund these improvements on an ongoing basis, they need to increase their corpus or endowment fund. The TOS is attempting to assist them with that endeavor. Many other TOS groups, particularly in India, run schools or educational programs for children, and TOS members around the world sponsor the education of many hundreds of others. In Sweden, the TOS helps orphans and street children. The Italian TOS is the major sponsor of an orphanage in India, and the TOS USA helps to support the Pine Ridge Native American Reservation's Lakota Waldorf School, and for 5 years now has given a scholarship to nursing students at the Oglala Lakota College's School of Nursing. In Kenya, the Nairobi TOS gives parties for children living in slum areas. The children are treated to an afternoon of food and fun and a little ice cream. They also run a library under the trees for the children. The Portland, Oregon's TOS USA group sent several $100s worth of art supplies to children, Kenyan children as well. For many years now, members of the TOS have imparted healing energy to those in need. In many places around the world, healing groups get together, usually weekly, to perform a ritual and a healing meditation that calls the devas, the angels, to assist in healing or a peaceful transition from this life. Names of those in need of healing are submitted by family or friends and are shared internationally. Animals are not neglected in this regard. The TOS in the USA and in Hungary have similar healing networks for animals. Other medically related TOS projects include the issuing of mobility aids, which is the principal project of the TOS in India. 1 out of every 200 children born in developing countries suffers from a repairable congenital or rheumatic heart defect. The Heart Babies Project, instituted by the Tanzanian TOS, addresses this issue. Also in Tanzania, the TOS youth started the first African branch of World Care Way, a charitable organization for youth dedicated to various social causes and environmental issues. The TOS in Puerto Rico raises funds that are sent to Haiti to purchase prosthetic limbs for children who were injured in the earthquake there a couple of years ago. These limbs need to be replaced as the children grow. 2 years ago, in September, the International TOS declared a worldwide focus on women's issues and asked TOS sections to sign on to this commitment. Several sections did sign on and are actively supporting women's safety both outside and inside the home, education for women, equal economic opportunities, and basic human rights. The especially fine work in gender issues of Dr. Deepapati and the TOS Bhubaneswar and Odisha region, India, attracted significant support from TOS groups in other countries. Their program culminated this winter with the publication of a book, Yes, She Can, which is a compilation of articles on various women's issues written by women and men renowned in their fields. Sales of the book are helping to fund programs to help low-income women. In Kenya, as well as India, women are being taught various skills in order for them to help support themselves and their families. The Alcott Education Society's Women's Vocational Center, while not a TOS program, is a shining example of providing poor women with skills that will help them to be more independent and to help provide for themselves and their families. The center teaches tailoring and weaving. Kenya is also trying to get a program off the ground that gives microloans to women to start small businesses. The Kenyan TOS also recently joined forces with a local landscaper to provide vocational training to young men in the area. They learned basic horticulture, garden design, and maintenance, and can now provide an income for their families. The TOS has all kinds of resources available on its website and people willing to listen to you and share ideas. The TOS's whole reason for existence is to support the Theosophical Society's work in making theosophy of transformative value in the world and in the life of the individual spiritual seeker. Gracias. Thank you.